Okay, thank you. Worcestershire quoted, "No one leaves home unless home becomes the mouth of a shark." This statement made by Worcestershire shows a clear and true depiction of the plight of the migrants and the refugees in today's scenario. A very good morning to one and all present here. I am Natalia M. Fenwick and I am studying at Sandeep University, Nasik. And I am currently in my fourth year of BA LLB. Today, 18 December, on Migrants Day, I thank every member of the Army Law College Pune for giving us a wonderful opportunity to speak and express our thoughts on the topic of human rights of migrants and refugees, global issues and challenges. Migrants, as we say, due to abject poverty, political instability, abuses, and other forms of torture, are forced to leave their own homelands. Greg Boyle rightly states that there is not a single deterrent imaginable that equals the conditions that forces migration. So undoubtedly, the migrant and the refugee issues are the human crisis which calls for urgent action and concrete solutions. Today, the estimated number of migrant population around the world is 272 million, which is just like more than half the population of Russia or everyone in UK fleeing their country on one fine day. In the last year alone, 2/3 of the total number of refugees came from just 5 countries, and they were Venezuela, South Sudan, Afghanistan, Syria, and Myanmar. According to the World Migration Report 2020, the Syrian Arab Republic and Turkey were the origin and the host countries of the largest number of refugees in the world, hosting around 6.7 and 3.7 million people. Canada became the largest refugee resettling country in the year 2018, resettling more refugees than that in the US. In the same year, Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela became the largest source country of asylum seekers. And the United Nations described the Rohingya Muslims fleeing as the textbook example of ethnic cleansing. So it is obvious that when such huge number of people are being displaced from one country to another, they tend to face a lot of issues and challenges. But before digging in deeper about the challenges that they face, it is pertinent to understand the meaning of the terms migrant and refugee. Are they the same or is there any difference? Migrant on one hand is a term that is clearly and strictly, it's not anywhere defined clearly under the international law. However, according to the mandate of the High Commissioner to protect and promote the human rights of all persons and the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for the Human Rights (OHCR) has clearly described a migrant as a person who is outside the state of their birth or of habitual residence. On the other hand, refugee is a term that is strictly defined under the international law to mean a person who is fleeing from persecution or from any other political conflict in their homeland. Now, coming back to the issues that many suffer illness and accidents and they do not even have or get the proper medical attention. Also, at the same time, many just die or disappear along their way. And this is not as easy like what I'm saying right now. The suffering of these migrants are immense. Many of these people are even put under prolonged detention despite of the fact that detention should be used only in exceptional circumstances as a last resort. According to Brandon and McKinsey, these people are forced to work in grey areas where they are vulnerable to exploitation. There is a lack of resources available to them, compounded by a myriad of legal, bureaucratic and administrative challenges that it makes it even difficult for the NGOs to provide assistance on humanitarian grounds. These are some of the many challenges faced by the migrants and refugees. On the other hand, the states also face some issues. For example, underdeveloping countries like India, where it is not possible or when it is not able to provide basic amenities and facilities to its own citizens, it becomes really difficult when tens and thousands of people are migrating from other countries. At the same time, the developed countries say that outsiders come and their resources will be looted, which will hamper their development and growth. Even we, the citizens, show resistance in accepting these migrants just because they are completely different from us. Either it can be by way of culture, tradition, caste, religion, race, ethnicity, it can be anything. But Despite of these facts, the international law clearly puts an obligation on each and every state to protect the human rights of the refugees and migrants. Each one of them has a right to access to justice, recovery, and rehabilitation. The political offenders have the right to seek for asylum, and according to the United Nations Convention Against Torture, no person shall be sent to return to such places where there is a possibility of being treated with cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Also, there is a much celebrated judgment which was given in the case of Papashvili versus Belgium, wherein the ECHR held that the country to where the persons are being returned, there adequate and proper medical care and medical facilities must be provided. This is in order to prevent the breach of non-refoulement. Also, at the international level, there are various policies and laws adopted and conventions held for the protection of the migrants and the refugees. One such is the Migrant Worker Supplementary Provisions Conventions 1975, which was held by the International Labour Organization. Then, in the year 1990, the United Nations held the International Convention on the Protection of Human Rights of All Persons, which mandates every state to protect not only the migrant workers but also their families. And in 1951, for the protection of the refugee protection, the Refugee Convention 1951 was adopted, whose core principle is the non-refoulement. And at the national level, the key piece of legislation available for the protection of the migrants is the Migrant Workers Regulation of Employment and Conditions of Services Act 1979. In the wake of the COVID-19 situation, I do not even have to explicitly say this, as we all know, we have all seen and seen through the news and newspapers, through the online platforms, the sufferings that the migrants had to go. Many had to just walk or cycle tens and thousands of miles to reach their home. And in the wake of this situation, many laws at national and international laws have been relaxed, and even in India there were certain changes made in the labour laws. At the most, the primary concern of all the states were to provide certain basic employment opportunities or at least security for few months. At this juncture, what is actually required is a collaborative effort of all the states to sit together and put forth a feasible solution. And this can be made only by conducting proper studies, surveys, and to assess the ability of the countries who are accepting the migrants, their infrastructural facilities, and also it is necessary to develop such innovative technological methods to respond quickly in cases of unmanaged migrant population. At the most, the priority must be in resettling the migrants and to affirm to the international values. At last, I would like to conclude by saying that the UDHR, the Universal Declaration of the Human Rights, the highest body which deals with the human rights, affirms each and every citizen the right to live with freedom and dignity. Rich or poor, migrant or refugee, every person has a right to live with dignity. And their protection of the human rights is a must.